Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yasmina Greco. I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I will be your host for today's webcast. Today we have Richard Hundhausen presenting Professional Scrum Development with Visual Studio 2012. Richard is the author of the brand new Microsoft Press book, Professional Scrum Development with Microsoft Visual Studio 2012. We're so thrilled to have him with us today to present this webcast for you all. I will turn the program over to Richard in just a moment, but first I'd like to go over some housekeeping things to help you get the most out of today's webcast. You'll want to open the group chat widget if you haven't already done so. This is where we can interact with each other during the event and where you can submit your questions for Richard. We find that our audience usually has a lot of good knowledge to share, so we encourage you all to chat freely during the event. However, if you have questions for Richard, please preface them with a capital letter Q so we know that they're for him and we can make sure he sees it for Q&A. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you'd like to tweet from the Twitter widget today, you may need to give it permission to access your account, and it will automatically append the event's hashtag to your tweet so you don't have to. If you have any problems during the event, please take a look at the Help widget. If you continue to have problems, please post it in the chat room and one of our staff will help you right away. For choppy audio or stalled visuals, please try refreshing your window. And remember, the best thing you can do for a good audio stream is to close any apps that could interfere. People always ask, so we'd like you to know we are recording today's webcast and we'll have an archive ready usually within 48 hours. And folks, at this time, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Richard for his presentation. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Yasmina. Thank you for that. And you're going to love this, but a fire alarm is just going off here in the building, so you have to forgive that noise in the background. But,
yeah, this is a live event, folks, as you can tell. Back to you, Richard.
You can tell. I don't smell smoke, so I think we're going to be fine. So yeah, I am also super excited to be here and talk about my favorite topics, which are Scrum and Visual Studio and how the two of them work so well together. First, just a bit about me. I am from Boise, Idaho, and I am a full-time geek. This is what I do. I specialize in Microsoft development tools, specifically their ALM tools. And lately I've been doing a lot with Scrum. I'm a certified professional Scrum developer and trainer. And as you can see from my photo there, I'm actually that guy driving around Boise with the Scrum license plates on my car. So yeah, I am that guy. An email address there if you have questions, or there's my Twitter handle if you want to reach out to me later and ask me questions directly. I'm happy to do that. So our backlog today is pretty basic. I want to make sure everyone on the call understands why Scrum is so popular and is so important and should be considered. And then talk a bit about what it means to be a professional Scrum developer. You know, a lot of people give credence to Scrum Masters, and they're the people that understand the rules of Scrum and make sure that an organization or a team is adhering to those rules and understands and works the best within that. But we can't forget the developers. These are the engines that actually build the software and deliver the business value. So I thought I should write a book about that in the intersection of how Scrum and Visual Studio 2012 works best for these professional Scrum developers. So we'll take a moment and talk about Scrum support in Visual Studio 2012, focusing mostly on the managing and planning of work and not so much on the engineering practices. I know developers like to get into the weeds and talk about testing and talk about design, coding, and best practices, and there's a ton of support in 2012 for that. You know, the new features in Premium Ultimate Edition and TFS. I could go on, and this could be an all-day webcast. So I'm going to focus mostly on the new web-based backlog and task planning and managing tools. And then finally we'll wrap up with just some guidance on how to be professional. You know, professional Scrum developers are not hobbyists. They do tend to like what they do, but at the end of the day they're professionals, and they understand that what they're doing is providing business value to their product in the form of working software. So I'm just going to go section by section here. And as Yasmina, as you said, if people have questions, just pop those over into the tool here, and you might have to remind me from time to time, go and have a look at that. So I might get busy talking about Scrum. So here's a chart that comes up from the Chaos Manifesto. This is from 2011, but what it does is it shows how popular Agile is compared to Waterfall. And these are actual projects looked at by this study from 2002 through 2010. It's an ongoing running survey, and you can see here that Agile is now so popular, they've pulled it out and put it into its own pie chart there on the right. You'll notice that they still have challenges and that there's still some failed projects, even in Agile, because what we do is very hard and complex. But I'm liking that 42% green slice of the pie on the right, showing that Agile projects are basically 3 times more likely to succeed than Waterfall. And there's a lot of things that go into this. It's often just about people and culture and how people work. But the nice thing about Agile and Scrum is it gives you lots of opportunities to inspect and adapt how you're working. So you can make changes and you can make these improvements to get that slice of pie even bigger for you and your project. Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland came out with a book earlier this year called Software in 30 Days. I love the title, and in fact it's directly related to Scrum, because in Scrum a sprint should be 30 days or less in length. And what they're talking about here is we can put working software on a desktop in 30 days or less. It may not be everything that the release needs, but it's at least something to start a conversation and then delta off of. And this, I'm putting on one slide here what is essentially a big bulk of a chapter in this book, but it's a case study around the FBI called the Automated Case Support System. Basically a CRM for criminals. If you've ever heard in the movies the FBI agent saying, "We're going to open a case on you," this is the system they're talking about. Well, it was to be replaced eventually. Even when it was built using 1970s era tools. They wanted to rebuild it, so they're going to build it a virtual case file. 4 years and $170 million wasted later. They still didn't have anything. They changed it to a new cool name called Sentinel. Unfortunately, the book graphic's hiding that a little bit, but Sentinel, so they budgeted twice as much money and wasted that. Still nothing to show for it. And then, of course, they reset it. They got the staff from 400 down to 40. 1 year later, $30 million using Scrum. They were code complete, and I believe it went online earlier this spring. So it's really a fascinating look at how software development at the highest level of government tends to waste just an enormous amount of money, and how Scrum, when used properly, can deliver working software. So I encourage you to pop that book open and have a look at that case study for all the details. So, okay, great. I want some. Where is it? What do I have to do? Where's the Buy Now button? Well, it's not a product, really. It's just a framework. There's a guide you can download from scrum.org. It's available in 30 different languages, and it just sets out the rules of Scrum. It talks about the different roles, the different events, the artifacts, and then the rules that bind all of those things together. It is quite easy to learn. It is quite difficult to master, only because it's a lot like exercising. Hey, I can explain to you how to do push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups. They're easy to explain. Now do them every day for the rest of your life. So that's the analogy. I mean, it's a discipline you have to get into Agile and certainly Scrum and continue to do it as a team, on and on. So digging a little deeper, I'm not going to spend much time on the framework itself, but let's just say that there are 3 roles. The product owner, who is responsible for the product and maximizing the value and understanding what the users and the customers want in that product, and then directing the development team to build that product in that sequence of those features or bug fixes. That is done with the help of a Scrum Master if necessary, to make sure people sort of follow the rules and work as efficiently and proficiently as they can. The events themselves, there's an outer container called the sprint, and that's anywhere from a week up to 4 weeks in length. I've actually heard of teams working in shorter than 1 week increments, which takes quite a bit of knowledge, and it allows them actually to make decisions very quickly. If their business requires them to make decisions that fast, every 3 days, for example, they might be doing something completely different, then a shorter sprint can really help them. Sprints longer than 30 days are really going back to the old way of doing things, which is let's go and work and not really surface for some time, and maybe not collaborate with people either. So we try to recommend somewhere in the 1 to 3 week range as a good length of a sprint. Now within the sprint, there are several other events that take place. There's a planning meeting where the whole Scrum team, that's the product owner, Scrum Master, and developers, meet together to come up with a comfortable amount of work from the product backlog that they'll be working on that sprint. They forecast this amount of work, they come up with a sprint goal, and they start to form the plan in the sprint backlog. And then they'll leave that meeting and they'll go off and develop that increment, meeting each day to discuss their plan for the next 24 hours. At the end of the sprint, I'm hoping there's lots of good business value to show, lots of features have been completed and bugs have been fixed. The product owner invites stakeholders, could be users or customers or the people paying the bills, to attend a sprint review meeting in where the increment is actually demonstrated. So working software is demonstrated on as close to a live production system as is possible, and the purpose of that meeting is to gather feedback. Hey, we like how that feature went together. We've got a new idea. Let's put that in the backlog. Oh, hey, we like that you fixed that bug. Now I can take this other bug out of the backlog because it was related. So you're always inspecting the increment and adapting the product backlog during that meeting. At the end of the sprint is a retrospective meeting where the stakeholders go away, and now the Scrum team focuses on inspecting and adapting their own process, their own practices. So how can we improve how we do things in the next sprint? And that could include using or abandoning different tools or different techniques. Maybe we tried pair programming in Sprint 6 and we decided to throw it away for Sprint 7, or maybe we really liked it, so we're going to embrace it and suggest that more developers use it. And then the artifacts are just the lists of the items that you want the product to do that it currently does not do. That's the product backlog. It has features, it has bugs, it could have gigantic themes, large stories, use cases, scenarios. There's really no specific type of PBI, product backlog item, that's in there. It's just a container for something the software does not yet do that it should. The sprint backlog, as I mentioned, is more of a tactical backlog that's put together during sprint planning meeting, and it contains the PBIs, the product backlog items that the team is going to forecast that they're going to work on that sprint, as well as the plan for doing it. And as you'll see here in a bit, the sprint backlog is actually manifested by the product backlog item, work items, and any associated task work items in a team project. And then the other artifact here is the increment, and this is the software product that the team is working on, including the new features and bug fixes that they're adding to it during the sprint. So the thinking is the increment is always getting larger, and at the end of the sprint and sprint review meeting, you're showing off the software plus what you've done during the sprint. So there you go. There's basically the Scrum framework, at least the roles, events, and artifacts in about 3 minutes. So now would be a good time to pop a question in if there are any. I haven't checked. Looks like none, so let me press on. So what does it mean to be a professional Scrum developer? It sounds very nice. Let's all be professional. Well, first of all, we're talking about the development team here. We're not talking about making certified or professional Scrum Masters or product owners or enlightening stakeholders. We're talking about the technical people that are responsible for building the increment. Okay, so I'd say first and foremost, they have to really know Scrum. They'd have to really know, their job, which may be in the past coding and writing tests and running tests and design and architecture and technical documentation, database design, build master, deployment guy. There are lots of different titles in the past. But when they become a professional Scrum developer, when they're using Scrum, they sort of tear up that old business card, and they're no longer a programmer or a tester. They're now just a developer. So Scrum's kind of overloaded that term developer to mean team member. If we want to refer to somebody within the development team who is maybe doing some coding activities, we'll say that's a developer who's writing code, or that's a developer who's programming today. There's really this approach to trying to abstract people from what they used to be called and sort of burn their business cards. I like to say, shave their heads and have them all get a tattoo of developer on their arm, because that's what they're doing. And if you think about it, Coders develop code, testers develop tests and test results, database administrators develop database schemas, on and on and on they go. They all come together during the sprint to develop an increment of working software. So this notion of a professional Scrum developer is something, it's a response to the industry saying, okay, what do we do? The Scrum Guide is rather vague. It says daily we should meet for a daily Scrum. If you guys want to stand up, that's your choice. You can sit down if you want. It's funny, I still run into people that call it the daily stand-up, and Scrum does not call it the daily stand-up. It's just the daily Scrum, and you can decide when and where to meet just so long as you do. And it doesn't take longer than 15 minutes. The goal of this meeting is to establish a plan for the next 24 hours, but it's not to solve problems. So what do you do the other 7 hours and 45 minutes of the day? Well, the software developer, the professional developer, does the right thing. They go back, they collaborate as needed, they work on items in the sprint backlog as needed, and they deliver business value in the form of working software. And that may mean sometimes you're working out of your comfort zone. This is something I run into. It's like, well, I'm a developer, but I'm a C# programmer, so I'm not going to get involved in writing tests, or I'm not going to, try to create some tables in SQL Server. I am a C# person. That's why I was hired, 2 years ago. And that mentality, that culture has got to change. You have to be able to look at what's sort of coming up next in the sprint backlog and take a piece of work. Maybe there's a very important testing task that's coming up, and the people who are good at testing are busy or gone. Well, you need to buck up, be a professional, and pull that task down into your queue. You may not be the best at it. You may struggle. You may need to pair up with somebody to learn how to do it better. But you shouldn't just say, I'm not going to do it because it's not my job. So that's just one example. I've got a list here of some other attributes of PSDs. The full list is in the book. I'm not going to say this is a code of ethics, but this is just a lot of attributes that I've witnessed PSDs in the past. So they should only do work that provides value to the software. If there are any actual programmers on the call, I'm with you. And I understand it's fun to sometimes get in the code and try new things and, get your new MSDN magazine for the month and you want to try out some new approach to reading data or persisting data. And great, go for it, so long as what you're doing maps back to a product backlog item or something that provides value. Gone are the days where you can tell the management, yeah, I'm working on that. It's going to be another, 8 weeks, and then you can spend a whole week playing around with some framework that looks interesting. Be a professional, not a hobbyist. Give honest estimates and plan realistic goals. Part of Agile estimation is a conversation, and it lets everybody on the team, even the quiet people that aren't necessarily the alpha geeks, have the same size voice as everybody else. Because as you're estimating a particular product backlog item, everybody has input, not just the people who've been doing this for 20 years. You shouldn't just automatically anchor your estimates to what other more experienced people are saying. So honest estimates, and that includes the alphas. If you're an alpha programmer, if people listen to what you say, if you are the chief architect, you need to drop that and listen to what other people have to say as well, because maybe there are some newer way of doing things you're not aware of. Respect the Scrum Guide. Respect the rules of the game. Ken Schwaber did a great blog post a while back equating the rules of Scrum to the rules of chess. You either play it by the rules or you don't. If you want to do something crazy like have 2 product owners or vary the length of your sprints or choose not to have daily scrums, great. I would say you're not doing Scrum anymore, and you're probably missing an important opportunity to inspect and adapt, or you're missing an important capability. The Scrum Guide didn't just write itself. It isn't accidental. It came to be, and it's been honed over several years, 15 years or more of people doing Scrum, and the rules work. You have to follow them, though, and you should give it time to do that before you start wanting to change it or wanting to customize it in any way. Transparency is big. If you're stuck, tell your teammates you're stuck. If you tried something and it was a miserable failure, tell your teammates it was a miserable failure. Learn from it. Other people don't learn from it unless you bring it up. Always minimize waste. One struggle I had writing this book was there's a lot of really neat, cool, shiny tools in 2012, Visual Studio 2012. And I'm thinking, okay, now do I write about this, or, man, would a good co-located high-performance Scrum team use this? And, an example would be maybe the PowerPoint storyboarding tool. I'm a big fan of that. You fire up PowerPoint, drag in some shapes, create a mock-up of the screen, the phone app, the website, whatever it is you're creating, and then you can drop that out to some share and people can come and have a look at it. Well, that's great, but couldn't you have walked over to the whiteboard with a couple other developers and a couple stakeholders, maybe the product owner, and done the same thing with a dry erase marker to get an idea across and get some conversation going? Nothing beats in-person collaborative conversation. And any tools that try to make that more valuable because we can persist it or we can remote it across the wire, in my opinion, that's waste. Now, if you do have a distributed team and there's no other way for them to look at the same picture at the same time or get feedback, then yeah, these are good tools. But those are the kinds of things that professional Scrum developers should start to do, is sort of grow a nose for what smells like waste. Okay, let's kick over to some tools now. I'm thinking some of you on the call are probably here for just this. So with Visual Studio 2012, not only is the Visual Studio Scrum process template in the box, but it's now the default template. Shortly after Visual Studio 2010 was launched at TechEd in 2010, they announced the beta version of Visual Studio Scrum 1.0. Now, there had been a couple other Scrum process templates out there. The EMC, formerly Conchengo guys, had one. It was very popular. It was a Scrum for Team system. There was a couple on CodePlex, and I think even a couple other third parties had one. Microsoft stepped onto the scene. They created this Visual Studio Scrum template. It was very minimalistic. Didn't have all of the Agile planning worksheets, didn't have all the Excel workbooks and reports. Some people were thinking, oh, I'm not going to use this because the MSF for Agile process template had all of those things in it, and this doesn't. But then there was those of us, and I should say I'm a little biased because I helped Microsoft design that template, that said, awesome, we don't need all that stuff. Scrum is more about people and collaboration and conversation than it is about using Excel to plan our capacities. So a lot of us really like and really grok that minimalistic design of the process template. And I guess a lot of other people did too, because as of a couple days ago I checked and there was like 116,000 downloads of that 1.0 process template. Now it's in the box. Now it's the default process template. This is both for the on-premises TFS as well as the TFS service, the tfspreview.com. So a lot of people are going to be accidentally using the Scrum template since they won't know any different and needing some support. So the 2.0 process template it's improved. It's got new capabilities in there. I've got a chart coming up here in just a second that talks about what's new and what's out and what's different. But it uses Scrum concepts. That's the biggest thing, is we call them product backlog items, not user stories. We call them impediments, not issues. So it maps to terms that those of us who do Scrum like to use. So this is what's new or what's different in the 2.0 template. And this is only going to be interesting to the people on the call here if you use the 1.0 template. So I put things in green that are new. They've been added to the template, and things in red, which is just the sprint work item type, that have been removed. Let me start with that one. The sprint work item type is no longer required because in Team Foundation Server 2012, you can now put start and end dates right on the iteration nodes themselves. And that was primarily the reason of the sprint work item type in the 1.0 template, is it gave you some extra metadata buckets to put the start and end date. It also gave you a place to put the sprint goal and sprint retrospective notes, and now that has been lost. So you'll need to go back to some alternate way of doing that, such as a document or some entries on SharePoint or a banner on the wall or something like that. We've got 4 new work item types: code review, request and response, and feedback request and response. And those are there for the new code review and the new stakeholder feedback tools that are in Visual Studio 2012. In the center column there, queries, we have a new feedback query which supports the feedback request and response workflows. And then everything else is pretty much the same. There's still the product backlog query at the top and then those 6 current sprint queries. And yes, you still have to update those current sprint queries each sprint. So if you want your sprint backlog query to work and it's the first day of sprint 3, you've got to go and manually edit it and change it to sprint 3. Although I do remember Mark Michaelis had a great blog post a while back on a kind of a hack or workaround for not having to do that every sprint. Send me an email if you want that link, and I'll hook you up with it. As far as reports go, the big news, and I think it's really big news, is we now have a backlog overview report. That is the Scrum templates version of the popular MSF Agile user stories overview report. So it gives you the bird's eye view of here's the PBI in this case, and here are the passing tests. So you can get kind of a high-level report that shows % complete at your forecast level for the sprint. Okay, we can also use the sprint burn down for that as well at more of a tactical task level. I'll show you guys that here in a minute. So briefly, you're going to see this in a demo in just a moment. The Team Web Access has been completely rewritten. It's very Ajax-y now, drag and drop, and it's got a first-class feeling to it. A lot of time and effort has been spent on Microsoft's part to make the backlog, dragging and dropping, prioritizing, and moving the tasks around, make that feel very, very comfortable. You get real-time charts too. That's another thing too. The velocity chart and the sprint burn down. So in my graphic there, you can see a little sprint burn down chart for Fabricam. That does not require the data warehouse to refresh and then the cube to refresh. That is real-time based off of the operational database. So if you go and complete a bunch of tasks and come back to this page and hit F5, boom, you're going to see that instant update of the chart. So that's really nice. I almost prefer that over the burn down chart reports because that still relies on the data warehouse to refresh. There's a forecasting tool. I'll show you that in a minute. But what that will let you do is plug in your velocity, and then it will just draw some lines in the backlog to kind of show you, given a velocity of, say, 18, here are the PBIs we think you can get finished in the next 5 sprints. So that takes a lot of assumptions that you've estimated those upcoming PBIs correctly, accurately, to the best of your ability, that your velocity will stay the same in those sprints, that you don't have any big hits like the team's going off to a conference or some retreat and your capacity is going to drop down. Speaking of teams, there's a new security container in 2012 called a team. It's different than a group, so we still have the team project groups of project administrators, contributors, readers, builders, but now there's a team level container where you can put people in there. They default to contributor access. It allows you to give them a name and a photo and even specify separate security for them. So you can let teams work on different portions of the product backlog. So it allows you to set up team alerts. So hey, everybody on the UI team in this team project gets an email when something gets checked into this folder in source control. And everybody over here on the services team of this big team project, they might have a different set of alerts so that everybody gets an email when something happens. So even the notion of team alerts is pretty cool in TFS 2012. If you've got a team of 9 developers, in the past, if you wanted them all to get an email, you'd have to ask nicely that they all go in and add themselves into that alert. Now you can just say, hey, team, get sent an email alert to insert their email address here, and it will send it out to everybody on the team. I'm going to demonstrate this, so I'm going to skip over that, and let's jump over here to the demo. So give me a second here to set up my screen share.
And Richard, when you have a chance, we do have several questions that have come in.
Sure, certainly. Okay, how do I prioritize these? All right, so I see they're all priority 2. That's awesome. So I'll just start here with the top one, which is, can we customize the sprint? I guess I would need to know more about what we're customizing on the sprint. So if that person could re-ask the question. I'm going to jump to the next one here, which is, did the new code review feedback feature storyboarding in VS require TFS 2012, or will they work with TFS 2010? They do require 2012 because they require the newer process templates that have those request and response work item types. And Brian Keller, since Scrum does not allow for hobbyists, as you put it, I assume then that the developer must spend their own time to further their knowledge. Not necessarily. If there's a need to go off and learn something, sometimes we call that a spike if it's like a really immediate learning opportunity, or if it's a longer term learning, like I need to go off to class or I need to go watch some videos from plural sites or whatever. Just make sure that your team doesn't need you, that the product owner sort of okays it, and that there's no surprises there. The ultimate goal here is communication with the product owner. So if you've forecasted we're going to work on these 5 features and then someone goes off and just spends all that time learning, your team was counting on you to get that work done. Another way I've seen teams do this is if there's an upcoming product backlog item that requires some new capability, Brian, that somebody doesn't have, like I've got to go off and learn Windows RT development for this new feature coming up. Well, then that small PBI, which maybe was a story points of like 5, just became a 13 because there's a lot of learning in there that's got to be done. And honestly, given your team's velocity of 15, that's the only thing you're going to be able to do that sprint. So you take that, you spend a lot of front-loaded learning on it, and then the next few WinRT kinds of development tasks coming up later, backlog items coming up later, will get smaller because you've already invested in that learning. All right, Willie, when will the book be available? Long-awaited title. I agree. I handed off all the documents and materials about 2 weeks ago, so as fast as they can make those presses go, I guess. I honestly don't know. I was thinking end of October might be a little aggressive, so I'm guessing maybe early to mid-November. Not for sure, though. Do I think the Scrum developer should have a Scrum developer certification? So Torben's asking me this question. There is a professional Scrum developer program. I'm going to talk about that at the end. Do I think they need a certification? If that's asking me like a loaded political question there, my personal answer is no. If you are a professional developer on a Scrum team, that will show and demonstrate itself. Look at the evidence of the value that you and your team members have generated, and there's all the evidence you need. You don't need a certificate hanging on the wall. That said, if you're unsure of it, or if you want some independent assessment of your knowledge of Scrum and development practices in a professional team environment, then I do recommend the Professional Scrum Developer Assessment, and I'll talk about that here coming up. And I don't know, is that good, or did any more questions pop up on me?
That's all we have right now. And just to let folks know who joined us a little bit late, if you do have a question for Richard and what he's talking to you about and showing you, open your group chat widgets right there at the bottom of your widget tray. Type that question in, send it in, and Richard will answer it while he's with us. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you. Well, let's see. I'm going to try to launch my screen here and get my screen share to map to my virtual machine here. And let's see. Forgive me, I'm a little fumbly on this guy. Trying to make this just fit and no more. I don't want you seeing all my mail here in the background. That would be boring. And we can probably go up here a little bit. And I'll put that away. And is that pretty close? Hoping that I'll probably drag this down a bit to about there. Okay, that works for me. I hope it works for you. I'm at 1280 something by 800, so we'll bring this back just a bit. Excellent. So for those of you who have not played with 2012 yet, I'm starting off with, I think, what is the best story.
Richard, if you could click the launch button, the play button, then we can all see it.
Ah, there we go. Even better. Are we seeing my screen now?
It's connecting right now, yes. Folks, you should be seeing Richard's desktop. It might open in another window for you. And if you have any problems, send us a chat and we'll take care of it. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you. So I'm starting off with what I think here is the best, neatest, coolest feature of TFS 2012, and that is the new Team Web Access. So it's a complete rewrite of what we've had in the past. It's very Ajax-y, it's very interactive, and it lets us here at basically the home page of our PSD project. So just to catch you up, I've got a team project collection called Webcast, and I've created a little impromptu project called PSD. It is based on the new Scrum template. And this dashboard here shows me, team favorites. I can drop queries here. I can drop, some other, reports and whatnot here. So I can create a dashboard that's interesting to my team. There's lots of little shortcuts everywhere. So I can jump right over here to the View Backlog if I want. Also, if I wanted to jump into some of the kind of admin options, that's this little cog up in the corner. And I've already opened it and sort of mounted it here on another tab. And I wanted to just spend a minute here. I've set up some areas in my project. So the thinking here is I've got a little e-commerce website, and I've got areas, centered around administration and customers and marketing and showing off social medias underneath community here. And under iterations, I've got just a couple releases and sprints planned out in the future. And since it's rather painful to do this stuff by hand, one of the little tools I built for the book is this thing called Scrum Robot. And it's real simple. It just connects to the TPC and the team project. And then I've just got here some code, remove the areas and then re-add them in. So administration, and then you can specify social media goes under community. So I've just got a nice little script here that sets up my areas. And down here, remove my iterations. And for the add the iterations, I actually built some logic here that says, actually let me uncomment this so I can show you the IntelliSense. So given the number of releases, and then the next one is the sprints per release. So I want 4 releases in the future, 6 sprints per release. Each sprint is 2 weeks in length. And then I set this to true, which is I want to reset the sprint number each release. Every team seems to do that differently. For example, just curious here. So when I go to release 2, I like to reset it here back to sprint 1, but some people might want to continue calling this sprint 295. I think after a while that just gets kind of demoralizing. So I'm more of a reset the sprint number guy, but every team seems to be different on that. So what's nice is this thing, if you go look at the code, and this code's all available to you, we can get it emailed out. Yasmina, I can get you a zip file for them, or just a URL to where it's going to be a companion website for the book. But it will generate all those iterations for me. And I've got code down here which sets the planning iterations. And let me just show you what that looks like. Notice how some of these guys are checked here. This says that, for this whole list of releases and sprints, for my team, when I come back here to my product backlog, which sprints are going to be listed over here on the left-hand side of the screen. So I've told it I want sprint 1, 2, 3, and 4 to be here. And it just keeps this panel on the left from being cluttered. You can have just the current sprint and maybe a couple sprints in the history, a couple sprints in the future. You're totally in charge by which ones you put the little checkbox next to. And then we'll talk in a minute about how that can help us with the sprint planning. And then I've also got code in here. I'm just going to finish with the Scrum Robot and then close this down. Destroy the work items and then create product backlog items. I've got this driven off of a little XML file. So sample PBIs, I've just got some real basics one in here. Create a customer login, and I want the server name and version number to appear at the bottom of all the pages. And I've got a CData section here for acceptance criteria, so we can do a little bulleted list of acceptance criteria. You can use this and change it however you want. Same thing is down here I can have tasks assigned to sprints, and I have a simple tasks document here. And this was kind of hard because I tried to make the same tasks be generic enough to fit any PBI. So I actually had another PSD help me on this. Design, create, code, database, tests, web tests, update the WSDL, whatever that means, update the CSS, localize this to Floridian, in case there's any people from Florida on the call. We need to make sure that the text makes sense to you. This was a nod to the people at TechEd. We use this code in TechEd. And there you go. So this will generate a whole bunch of stuff for you quickly so that you can play with the tool, and that's what I did in the book. So don't tell anybody, but I wrote code that helped me write the book. So once we've got this product backlog screen up here, we can quickly add other items in here too, like I might want to, add a Facebook integration control. And the high-level items I can add to the PBI of the product backlog are bugs or product backlog items. Because really in Scrum, there's no such thing as a bug. There are just items in the backlog that may be bugs. So the fact that TFS differentiates it as a separate work item type is because the bug tracks, expected behavior, the actual steps to reproduce it, things that aren't in the PBI. But I've seen teams not even use the bug work item. They'll just have PBIs, which are of type bug. So I'll leave this, quickly add it in here, maybe double-click this guy. I do recommend some things in the product backlog, like maybe all the PBIs are assigned to the product owner, and the product owner looks at them and says, I approve of that, and maybe the team gets together and does an estimation, and that's going to be about an 8 story point problem. And we'll save and close that guy. And let me just pop a couple other ones in here real quick. We'll do a quick estimation exercise. So there's an 8 and a 5, and server and version number, maybe that's a 3. Notice also you can have here breakdowns. You can have a parent level PBI. Some people call these epics, but they're basically PBIs that are too big to do on their own. So maybe this would be so many story points you could not, as a team, get it all accomplished in one sprint. So that means you have to decompose it into smaller stories or smaller PBIs. And this actually lets you set up this child linkage, because since TFS 2010, you've been able to have these hierarchies of work items. Well, we can now have parent-child relationships, PBI to PBI, displayed in here. And you can collapse these, and you can make it a little more user-friendly. That's nice. The other thing I wanted to show you in here is you can turn on forecasting. So if you've got these guys estimated, and on down, the tip of the iceberg has been estimated down so far, then you can say things like, hey, given a velocity of 18, then it's putting these lines on here saying, well, okay, we think we can do this much work in sprint 1, and then a lot of this is because I didn't put in efforts for that, so that's a little bit off. And then sprint 2, and it's just totaling these numbers up to where they still fit, at or under 18. It's not supposed to be, a tool that you just blindly use to forecast the work for a sprint. It's supposed to be yet another input for the conversation. So you, as a team, should always forecast a comfortable amount of work using the velocity and this tool here for the forecast tool as just other inputs for that discussion. And if we decide, yeah, this looks good, we're going to go ahead and take these PBIs over into sprint 1. You can just drag and drop these guys up here. And then if you bounce over to sprint 1, you'll see these listed. Should probably mark them as committed as well. Although we don't use that term anymore in sprint planning, we use the term forecasted, but the tool still uses the state committed. It basically means it's planned. At this point in time, the development team believes they can get these 3 things done given all of the inputs. But they may not. Part of being a professional Scrum developer is realizing that what we do is very hard, very complex, and things can happen. Just like a forecast, we think it's going to be sunny all week, but hey, it's going to rain on Thursday, and we're not going to be able to mow the yard, so we're sorry. Okay, I'll come back to this in a minute. I want to bounce back over here to the presentation. And thanks for that. I'll pop back over. Okay, great. So the sprint backlog page, this is a smaller, more tactical look at the work that the team is forecasting for the sprint, including the tasks themselves. And I'll pop back over here in a minute. Once you get the task work items created, and I should point out too that I've met a fair amount of Scrum development teams that don't like to use task work items. They can just leave the PBIs and bugs in there, drag them into the sprint, and then the team is smart enough to come up with their own task. They don't need to create a task that says go and add a table to a database and go and add a new class to the namespace. They can figure that out on their own, or they can use sticky notes, or they can use a whiteboard to plan that level of work. So The good news is you don't have to use them. The bad news is if you want to use this really slick new task board in Team Web Access, the way it is right now, you can only drag task work items across the different states. And I'll demonstrate this here in just a minute. But it does allow you to quickly see items, and these are tasks, and they're estimated in hours, what's to be done, what's in progress, and what has been finished or done. And those are the only 3 states that the Scrum template uses. You can see a roll-up of hours. You can see how many hours left given our daily estimates of what the work remaining is per PBI or bug fix, as well as how that affects the sprint burn down. So given the number of days left in the sprint and given our estimate that we have 180 hours of work total to do we think we can make the sprint review or not? Okay. So let me bounce back over here and just show you those couple items. Okay, so here it comes. Now, I could have run the Scrum Robot and had it add all my tasks in here, but I just wanted to show you it's not hard at all to add tasks. In fact, this big plus sign here is a way to quickly add a related task. So maybe for this, we need to, research free open source, libraries. And maybe we don't assign that to anybody, or maybe we do. I don't have a very interesting team here, as you can tell. But it's okay to have task work items not assigned to people. And first of all, I hate the term assigned, not owned by or not in anybody's particular queue of work. Because if you think about it as a task board, you walk up and you see what stickies are left, and you can just pull one down that needs to be done. So I also don't like this activity drop-down. I talk about this in the book as well. Deployment, design, development, testing, requirements. I understand that you can use this tool to start to capacity plan by activity level so that you can see, we need more testers or we need more designers. But remember, we don't use those terms in Scrum. Professional Scrum development teams are able to do, any one of those people is able to do any one of these items, albeit sometimes clumsily, but they can pair up with somebody. So if you want to think of an analog example of what I'm talking about, if you ever put stickies on a board, the yellow stickies are programming tasks, the green stickies are testing tasks, red stickies are database tasks, then it conditions people to look for their color, and that's not necessarily what's best for the increment at that point in time. So this is saying leave this blank, or if you want, make them all development, but that's really a waste, so that the team can come together and collaborate and see what the next task is to be done, not just given the activity type that they're good at. Remaining work, so you always want to update this daily once it's assigned to you, and you can come in here and see, am I done with this, and if not, how much work is left. And let me do one more here. So we'll sign up for a Facebook account. And remaining work on that, I don't know. We better put 8 hours down for that, because I've heard that's a really lengthy process. And we can change our estimates as soon as we know more information about that. So there we've got 2 tasks. At this point, we can now leave the backlog and go over here to the board, and we see sort of a refresh of this. So we can see those same PBIs listed, down this way, and you can collapse them to make it a little easier to read. But more importantly, you've got your tasks here. So 2 hours left here for this task, 8 hours left for this one. And you go, well, we can both be doing these. So I can drag this task over here to in progress. Maybe I can just click this guy and say, okay, I've got 1 hour left on that, because honestly, it's an easy research. Facebook account, I'm just going to drag it all the way to done, and that'll take the 8 and knock it down to 0 for me. So you can click them, you can edit them, you can change the assigned to people easily. You can add notes. You can also look at the board by team member. It's not a very interesting setup right now, but if you have all your different development team down the left-hand side here, you can see sort of who's working on what and who has what items in progress and who's completed what items. And you can also turn on this little filter over. It's not really a filter. It just lights up a specific person, and you can see their tasks stand out. Their cards are a little bit brighter. So this is nice. You can visualize the work in progress for a given PBI or all the PBIs. Up here in the corner, you don't see it, but there's the burn down for the sprint. So you'll get that little declination graph up here. You can click it, and you'll get a zoom on it, with the dates in the sprint. And I don't have any really interesting work in here yet. So it's wonderful. I love this tool. I think it's going in the right direction. The fact that they're going to be doing updates on it regularly, both in the service and on the on-premises version, is completely awesome. So I love that Microsoft's thinking first-class support for Scrum teams in this tool, and I can't wait to see what's coming next. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to bounce back here and get caught back up on my discussion. I'm not about to go through this slide with you. In fact, on my screen, I can't even really read it. But what I have done here is I've made a two-column mapping of concepts in Scrum and where or how are they supported in Visual Studio. So, for example, the product most likely maps to a single team project, and then the product backlog would be a query that brings back all the PBI and bug work items together. A PBI is a PBI or bug work item. Let's see, look on the list here. An impediment would be an impediment work item. Retrospective, if you do take notes on, how did this sprint go from a process or a practice point of view by the team, you can log those notes into a wiki entry or a document on the SharePoint portal. If there's any actionable tasks, they can be, put back into TFS as work items. And I do recommend that. It's one of the first questions I ask a team. I'll get invited in to do some training or give a talk to a team, and they say, "Oh yeah, we do Scrum," and rather than get into the weeds of, well, how do you put your backlog together and who's your Scrum Master, I start with, tell me about your retrospectives, and that's usually the first thing to go. Is either teams will stop having them, or if they do have the retrospective meetings, they'll really not be applying anything that comes up in the meeting. They'll have the same impediments. They'll have the same problems, retrospective after retrospective. So if I want to start my digging, I start with that question. Well, tell me about your sprint retrospectives. And usually there's a gulp and a step back, and people say, well, yeah, we could do better with that. So let's wrap it up by just going over once again how to be professional. And this talks a bit about scrum.org and the programs there. So if we flash back to 2009, Martin Fowler kind of got the whole ball rolling when he described something called flaccid Scrum. And it's on his Blicky there. You can go and read about it. But basically, I summarize it to say lots of people were doing Scrum, but they were just using the nouns and not doing the verbs. Yeah, we've got a product backlog, and Joe, he's the Scrum Master. Paul is the product owner, and yeah, we've got sprints, but we're not being able to develop anything with business value. And, we were always compromising quality to get something done at the last minute. So they really weren't doing the activities. They weren't inspecting. They weren't adapting. They were just, using the nouns and throwing around the framework. They were believing in magic. I still run into people that think, hey, if we just use Scrum, it'll magically make the software, develop itself faster. And there's a great little YouTube video out there. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's sort of part 2 to I Want to Run an Agile Project. It's a great video. I know there's some Scrum developers on the call here today. So part 2 is they've hired this, Scrum Agile guy to join a consulting company, and they want to send him out to this one client so that he'll make them more money. And they don't realize that bringing Agile or Scrum onto a team is a real commitment to work from everybody. It's not just a silver bullet. So we need to get that message out too, that it's not just knowing how to do a push-up and a pull-up and a sit-up, but it's doing them as a team each day, even when it's hard. So scrum.org is the home of Scrum, founded in 2009 by Ken Schwaber, as a direct answer to this flaccid Scrum dilemma. We tried to kick off a lot of the development programs at what was then, Ken was involved with the Scrum Alliance, but the Professional Scrum Developer Program really was a new thing that they were not ready for. So scrum.org spun up, and Professional Scrum Developer Program was its flagship program. They're a Microsoft strategic partner insofar as you go to that MSDN page there, you can learn more about the Professional Scrum Developer Program, the course that brings together a fusion of Scrum, Visual Studio ALM, and development practices. And there's a number of trainers around the world that teach that as well. So that's kind of the point here I want to make, which is the Professional Scrum Developer Program, the PSD program, is the cure for flaccid Scrum. It teaches and enables and gives an assessment around the doers, the people who are responsible for delivering business value in the form of working software. It expects them and gives them training on Scrum, the ALM tools in Visual Studio 2012, for example, modern development practices such as test-driven development, CI, pair programming, refactoring, automated builds, automated testing. These practices which some people see as extreme are not extreme anymore. They're mainstream, and the tool supports it in a first-class way. So it's time that these development teams start to grok it, start to use it to their advantage. And this whole program was developed in a partnership between Microsoft and Scrum.org. So you're going to get the Scrum message on one page, the Visual Studio message on the next page, and it's that fusion of everything together which really is important. You get to work as a team together. You get to use these tools and practices together, and you get to succeed and fail together. And probably the last bit of bad news here is, as we all know in this industry, you're never done learning. And as PSDs know, you're never done improving. Okay, so you never are good enough. There's always somewhere to improve. There's always a new piece of the domain to learn, a new way to use the tool, a better way to collaborate. Heck, we even talk about active listening, which I know a lot of people who have sort of ADHD and tapping of feet, and they don't listen, but they like to talk, and then the meetings are never productive. So we talk about that. Hey, what are some techniques you can use to listen better? Because a lot of these meetings are about listening and conversing. And if you can fix that, forget dropping in some shiny software. If you can just make your developers listen better, that's a huge improvement. So that's the kind of topics we get into. Kind of a roadmap for you guys if you're interested. Download the Scrum Guide, read through it. It's available in 30 languages. There's a free open assessment on scrum.org. If you're a developer, read my book when it comes out. It talks about the fusion of all these topics. Consider sending your team or just you through one of our instructor-led classes, team-based classes, and then afterwards you can take the proper assessment and take the full-on Professional Scrum Developer assessment and then become certified. So as far as the presentation goes, that's it. I am done. Leave you with my contact information there, Twitter, and even a hashtag around this topic, and want to thank you guys very much.
Great presentation, Richard. Thank you so much. We do have just a couple of moments left, and we do have a few questions that have come in. Are you able to see them?
I am, and I see Tommy's question. I cannot wait. Given the ever-changing product backlog, do you recommend pre-assigning PBIs to future sprints? Tommy, I do not. I know that sometimes that works in people's favor, but oftentimes it does not. So knowing just what's coming in this sprint and then letting the product owner decide at the latest responsible moment, which would be the next sprint planning meeting, what items should go into that sprint is probably best. If you're talking about just dragging PBIs to the sprints according to the forecasting tool, yeah, that's not such a big deal. Drag them back if you were wrong. But it didn't take long in the first place, so do it during sprint planning in the next sprint. What I really don't like to see, though, is people going, well, I already know the tasks around those PBIs, and let me go ahead and start pre-creating some test cases around that. That is complete waste until the sprint in which you're actually committed to working on that. Okay, so let's see here. We've got a question from Dave Hine. Is there any task boards for template 1? Not from Microsoft, there's not, Dave, but I am a huge fan of Urban Turtle. I know there's some Pixis guys here on the call. If you just go and search on Urban Turtle, it's a commercially licensed product, but it does work on the 1.0 TFS 2010 template. And you get the same experience, the vertical drag and drop for prioritizing and the horizontal drag and drop for your task boards. Great question. Will the Scrum Bot work on TFS Preview? It should, Dwight. I haven't tested it, but the APIs are all there, and you might just need to authenticate manually or something first, but I believe it would all work. Good question. And Richard, I'm not going to answer your question. No, actually I will. Why are there no story points for backlog items? I think it's because in my Scrum Robot, I forgot to put those in the little XML document, but there should have been. If your question is more generic than why was my example missing story points, it shouldn't. If you've not yet estimated a PBI using story points or whatever other unit of measure you want to call it, then yeah, I would not even consider forecasting that piece of work. Another PSD buddy of mine actually said, I won't recommend that a team brings a piece of work into a sprint, forecasts it and commits to doing it, unless we've talked about it 3 times during the product backlog grooming. So we put our eyes on it and we've estimated it 3 distinct times, and then maybe we bring it into the sprint. That's a good question. Lots of guidance in the book. Everything I've talked about times 10 is in that book, and I really poured my heart into it. It took me lots more months than I thought it would because there's just no end to the kind of information I can share. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard, for presenting an outstanding webcast for us all today and for sharing all your knowledge and expertise. Folks that attended, we thank you for attending and hope you benefited. Lots of questions from you all in the group chat regarding when the book is available. I can tell you, you can pre-order Richard's book now for 40% off the print version, okay? So you can pre-order it. Again, we thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone. This will conclude our webcast today. Goodbye, everybody.